In this video I'll be turning an old reclaimed dining tabletop into something a little bit unusual. About 8 years ago a friend of mine challenged me to make her a zebra print coffee table, and this is what I came up with at the time. The base of this table was salvaged from a coffee table that I found dumped in an alleyway, so it's just the tabletop itself that I actually made. Anyway, recently someone sent me an email after seeing a photo of that table on my website asking if I could make another one. I said yes, but ultimately never heard back from them. But I decided I wanted to make one anyway, as A, I thought it'd make for an interesting video to demonstrate the techniques that I used to make it, and B, it'll be a good way to use up some salvage materials that, to be honest, have been getting in my way around the workshop recently. This old dining tabletop was given to me by my auntie, and it had been sitting in her garden for some time, so it was a little bit weathered and dirty. I'd already pressure washed it a few months back to get rid of some bird poop. It had this engraved detailing on the top, which I'm not really a fan of, plus the ends of the tabletop had some splits in where moisture had separated some of the original glue joints. Judging by the wood grain, it appeared to be stained rubberwood, which is a hardwood usually found in inexpensive furniture imported over from Asia, and it's made up of small staves of the wood finger jointed together. First I can get rid of the apron rails that would have once supported the legs, which I didn't have. I'm not sure what happened to those. I'll definitely salvage some of this wood too. Before running any of this wood through my machines, I want to remove any dirt that was trapped underneath, as that will blunt my blades. I found a rusty broken screw too, so I used some pliers to twist that out. I'm going to cut away the ends using my track saw to get rid of those splits. And as soon as I cut into it, I knew it was definitely rubberwood because it has a nasty smell to it. I also ripped the edges clean and square. To get rid of these grooves and the engraved bits, I wanted to run it through my thicknesser, but my thicknesser has a maximum capacity of 260mm, so I set my table saw fence to a little bit less than that and cut it into pieces. And then I set the thicknesser up and started taking multiple passes, removing about 1mm at a time from the surface until the wood was clean. When I positioned the pieces back together in the same order as they were originally, most of the joins looked really good and tight with no gaps, but one of the pieces had gaps towards each end. So I marked up with a pencil where material would need to be removed, and then I used my number 5 hand plane to take a few shavings from the middle of the edge of the board. And then they joined much better. There was still a gap right at the very end, but I wasn't worried about that because that's going to be cut away later anyway. I set up my parallel clamps ready to glue it all back together. Either biscuits, dowels or dominoes could be used here to get alignment of the boards nice and level. But when I did a dry run, the boards were joining pretty nicely without them, so I decided they weren't necessary. I just used my mallet and a block of wood to flush up the joins where needed. After an hour or so, when the glue had beaded up, I scraped away the excess. And then I ripped a clean end, and I figured out I could get 2 coffee tabletops out of this one workpiece. So I cut it into 2 600mm lengths. And then I ripped them at the table saw to 600mm square. I then sanded at 120 and 240 grit, and then it was on to the fun part. I googled tiger print for a bit of inspiration and then started sketching a design onto the top. Once I was happy with that, next I'm going to use my trim router to trace the lines. And the bit I'm using here is a V-groove bit. I'm sure there are probably better bits to use for this purpose, but I'm just working with what I have and this will work just fine. I just needed to set it into the router so that only the very tip is exposed. And it's a good idea to test it out on a scrap piece before going for it on the real thing, just to check the depth setting. So the reason I'm routing these grooves is because it's going to help stop the stain that I'm going to be using soaking into the grain and potentially running from the dark parts of the design into the lighter parts. I then sand again using 240 grit just to remove any tear out left by the router bit and also help remove any remaining pencil marks. And there were a few areas that needed a bit more touch up with an eraser and some hand sanding. For a stain, I'm going to use some India ink to give me a nice jet black colour. But you could use a dark wood stain, which is actually what I used on the original, for a brown colour instead. I apply the ink using an artist's paintbrush, and it's important to keep the brush quite dry when painting it on, as if you load up the brush too much it's going to run into the areas where you don't want it to go, and then you'll need to do lots of cleanup work with sandpaper or a scraper, so it's best to take your time and apply it carefully. It's also worth keeping the bristles of the brush quite flat to the workpiece as you paint it on, so that you paint up to the edge of the groove but not into the groove. I added a small round over to the top and bottom edges of the tabletop, and I added my maker's mark to the underside. With that done, I can move on to applying finish, and I don't want to brush on a finish here because I would run the risk of spreading some of that ink around, so instead I used an acrylic spray varnish. The acrylic varnish is also going to preserve the light colour of the wood and not darken it like an oil-based finish would. I'm finishing both the underside and the top of the table. This will help the wood not to twist or warp with humidity changes over time. I applied 3 coats in total, denibbing in between each coat once it was dry using some 400 grit wet and dry paper. Once this finish is dry, you can see it leaves a nice subtle sheen. The legs I'm going to be using here are salvaged from some coffee tables that were cleared in an office clearance. I've previously used these on 2 other tables, one with a scaffold board top which was sold on Etsy, and one with a solid beech and sapele top which happens to still be available for sale on Etsy to this day. I thought I'd mention that just in case anyone watching is interested in buying it. I have build videos for both of those projects, which I'll leave links to in the description box below. I think I've got about 4 sets of these legs left, and I've been tripping over these 2 in the workshop for too long now, so I'll be glad to get these out of the way. After giving the legs a thorough sanding at 120 grit to remove the old paint, I wipe them over with some white spirit to make sure they're clean, and then apply some of this black metal paint by Hammerite. I've used this in the past, so I know it's good and hard wearing, and I'll leave a link to this in the description box below if you're interested in it. To secure the legs to the table, I'm going to be using some threaded insert nuts. These are M6 size, and I can use one of these to set the depth that I need to drill to by adding some masking tape to the drill bit. Then I drill an 8mm hole and add the threaded insert using an Allen key. I added a large washer and a bolt to secure the legs in place. This will provide a very strong and secure fixing, and it will also allow the wood to expand and contract with seasonal changes. This kind of animal print coffee table design isn't really to my taste, to be honest. It's not something I would want in my house. and it might not be to your taste either, but I think it does look cool and interesting, and I know that some people out there really like this kind of thing. This table will be available for sale on my Etsy page if anyone watching is interested in buying it. And by the way, the second workpiece that I got from the same dining table top, I decided just to keep plain, and I finished with acrylic varnish as well. Added some of the same legs too, and that table is also available for sale on my Etsy page. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to my channel for more weekly woodworking videos. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so on PayPal, Patreon, or YouTube channel membership. Links to those in the description box below. And on Patreon and YouTube channel membership, you can also get early access to my videos, free project plans and cut lists, some exclusive videos, and a name credit at the end of my videos. Thanks for watching.